So welcome to this lecture. I'm Javier de La Torre, and I'm going to present Personalizing Rehabilitation with Technology. So first of all, why personalizing rehabilitation? Well, the application of digital technologies into the rehabilitation field has led to a kind of merge with this serious gaming approach. And serious gaming can be defined as a game that is designed for a primary purpose other than pure entertainment. So more specifically, these would be games that incorporate into themselves principles from learning, from gaming, and from simulation. And with simulation here, we are referring to real world objectives or scenarios in which the rules are clearly defined and can generalize to activities of daily living, for instance. So we can embed a rehabilitation protocol in the form of a game, which offers a series of advantages. For instance, they allow to make successive tasks increasingly difficult, adapting to each patient's needs. They give frequent feedback and reward. They can add unexpected turns of events, which is keeping the attention of the users, or in the rehabilitation case of the patients. We can provide users with a significant degree of control, as it is them that are enacted to perform, and they can see the evolution of their performance, set and enforce clear tasks, goal-oriented rules. So we can see that they are clearly goal-oriented, and we can moreover operationalize this later to assess performance in more objective ways. They allow for trial and error, and they allow to perform user experience tests and experimental design. So importantly, we can see that a set of these points goes in line pretty well with the neurorehabilitation principles or active ingredients of neurorehabilitation that we have described in other lectures. Moreover, towards this personalization, we now have evidence that has studied the application of treatments that are adapting to how the patient is performing and so on using digital technologies, showing that personalized approaches increase compliance and retention of participants and augment skills practice. This is important for longitudinal retention and long-term improvement. Moreover, let's say all of the field, or at least all recent approaches, converge to a necessary conceptual shift, let's say from one-size-fits-all treatments, such as conventional treatments in which patients with motor impairments are treated using the same strategies or the same protocols, to a rehabilitation that is set up towards personalized home-based treatment strategies. So let's see how can we do that and merge all of these different fields to actual rehabilitation protocols. For instance, from gaming, we can take these adaptive difficulty approaches and reminding Yerkes and Dodson law, in which we know that rehabilitation protocols should not be too easy, because that would provoke sleepiness in participants, or should not be too hard, as they would provoke a strong stress, anxiety, or even impaired performance. So we should keep participants at an optimal level of arousal, which has been often defined as keeping a window of around 70% of correct performance. This, moreover, impacts cognitive processes like attention, memory, and problem solving. So we can take this from video games, and many video games, such as Mario Bros, for instance, are modifying the environment based on users' requirements, and they apply this kind of learning or difficulty curves in which difficulty is increasing, responding to participants' performance, and they also incorporate peaks that modulate these shifts in attention towards the game, or in our case, the therapy. So to give some examples of how this is done in rehabilitation approaches. For instance, in motor rehabilitation, we have introduced protocols in which participants have to manually grasp spheres that are coming to them. We can manipulate the difficulty of these protocols depending on the side of the screen. So the right hand or the healthy hand would have 1 degree of difficulty, and the affected arm would have a different degree of difficulty, keeping the overall difficulty at around the 70% of performance, as we were commenting. We can moreover adapt or manipulate the visual stimuli in the virtual scenarios, helping participants to actually perform better or increasing the probability of success by manipulating the mapping between the physical movement and the virtual movement of the avatar, depending on the needs of these participants. We can even do so using the wearable technologies. For instance, we can set up personalized goals depending on how patient performed during the last week. This all would englobe an adaptive layer of adjustment depending on patient's capabilities. For instance, if you used your arm a lot during the last week, we could assume that we can set a higher goal for the next week, while if you are having problems to achieve the specific goal, we can reduce the cost of achieving this goal or reduce the explicit amount that has to be performed. But adaptation doesn't end there. So we have seen adaptive approaches, but on a more high level, we can see in different domains this tendency towards user profiling, which can be defined generally as a tool that, by exploiting past user behavior, provides suggestions of items or possible actions to the user. For instance, we can see this in Google or in Amazon recommendations, but let's go more applied to the health sector. This can be described as precision medicine, and precision medicine aims to categorize groups of patients delivering an optimal treatment that will lead to an optimal outcome depending on the type of patient that you are. As we were saying, stroke population is heterogeneous, and we couldn't be applying the same mechanisms for all the patients which have varying conditions, such as different lesion locations, different motor capabilities, etc. So this precision medicine, what does is making healthcare decision-making and costs more efficient. So how can we apply this user profiling in neurorehabilitation? Well, based on state-of-the-art cognitive architectures, we could think as an intelligent rehabilitation code that integrates a layered architecture that goes as follows. For instance, based on distributed adaptive control theory, we can integrate a somatic layer that is just composed by the sensors and actuators of the system, a reactive layer which would provide raw feedback based on the interaction with the system. For instance, you use your arm this specific amount without processing or adapting depending on the context. Then on top of that would go an adaptive layer that is adjusting this feedback based on, for instance, internal states of the participants that we can compute and create a kind of digital twin for that, and showing them feedback that is personalized on their past behavior. And on top of all of this would go the user profiling, that is a contextual layer that is integrating memory from previous interactions and then can categorize patients based on their specific profiles to deliver the optimal rehabilitation approach. So for instance, these kind of approaches have been already applied successfully in, for instance, assistive technology for data exploration of complex data sets, or for learning means supporting the feedback and the content based on the progress of the students. In rehabilitation, for instance, this should be accompanied by basic research. For instance, the use of transcranial direct current stimulation, which is a technology that is costly and cannot be applied to all of the patients. So from basic research studies, we can incorporate information such as what patients would benefit from this treatment and what patients would not benefit from this treatment. And for instance, taking into account parameters such as lesion location, baseline level of impairment, motor capabilities, age, gender, or time post-stroke, we can apply certain intervention depending on the patient's profile. So it's not that we are throwing the technology to all of the patients and see what happens, but actually accurately detecting the necessities of these patients to act on behalf in the most appropriate way. In doing so, we are working on these cognitive architectures and how can they integrate different sensors and all the users' data and use it within these different layers to provide the optimal outcomes. And by using a modular design in doing so, we should not worry about if the ends is a rehabilitation protocol or activities of daily living, as long as the data integration inside of these architectures is working properly. So this is all for this lecture. Hope you liked it and see you in other lectures. Bye.